In this video, I'm going to show you how to sew a sheer long sleeve t-shirt. For this project, you're going to need thread, pins, scissors, and a stretch fabric. I went with something very sheer, but you can use any thickness you like. And then I'm going to use an already existing long sleeve that I have, but if you like, you could use a t-shirt as well. I really like to use clothes that I already have to create patterns because I know I like the way they fit, and I think it's a really good exercise to practice sewing. So we're going to lay out our shirt on our fabric, and at the seams we're going to cut around, leaving a 1 centimeter or more seam allowance. You also want to make sure that you're leaving enough fabric on the bottom to create a hem with that fabric. The reason you'd leave more is just to create a little leeway with this project. So if you want it to be a little bigger, you have that option. When you're cutting the sleeve, you want to make sure that you're cutting around the curve of the seam, again leaving the seam allowance. And then we're going to cut just straight across, ignoring the neckline. When copying out patterns, I like to fold the fabric in half to make sure that both sides are going to be exactly equal. When creating the back piece, we want to use the length of the front piece we just created as a guide. So we're going to place this on our fabric, as well as the long sleeve, and we're going to use these two together as a stencil. There will be a difference in the curve of the arm between the front piece and the back piece of our shirt. Now, using pins, we're going to mark out where the armpit is of the under layer, and then we can remove that piece. This is just to ensure that the back piece that we're creating is going to have the same length as the front piece. Now we're going to do the same thing, just cutting away the fabric at the seams, leaving your decided seam allowance, and then cutting straight across at the neckline. I'm going to do the folding technique again because I do feel it's the most accurate. And now we have our front and our back pieces cut out. And now we're going to do the exact same for the sleeve, again leaving fabric at the bottom to create a hem. I cut the sleeve quite a bit wider because I wanted to create more of a bell shape. And this is where you can have fun recreating patterns because you can make these types of adjustments. Following the seam of the cap of the sleeve is a little trickier, but it's still just following the same technique. Then you're going to fold it in half and cut the other side of your sleeve. And here you can see the bell shape as well as the curved cap of the sleeve. And you're going to cut 2 of these pieces. Now we're ready to pin together the side seams of our bodice. We're going to pin the shoulders as well. You can see the front piece is a little bit gapey, but that's perfectly okay. So we're going to do the 2 side seams and the 2 shoulder seams, leaving a good opening for the neckline, which we'll adjust later. Now we're going to sew with a zigzag stitch these 4 seams. I always trim away the excess fabric because I feel like this leaves a cleaner finish. Then we're going to fold our sleeves in half and sew that seam as well. You should be sewing all your right sides together. For my fabric, there isn't a difference between the 2 sides, but if yours has a difference, you're going to want to be sewing right sides together. So now we're going to sew the 2 seams for the sleeves. Again, using a zigzag stitch because we are using a stretch fabric. And then if you wish, cutting away the excess seam allowance. Now with our bodice inside out and our sleeves right side out, we're going to insert the sleeve into the bodice. And we're going to be aligning the 2 seams, the seam of the bodice and the seam of the sleeve, right sides together. And then we're going to pin along the whole armhole, attaching the sleeve to the bodice. And we're going to do this for both sleeves. If you have any excess fabric in your sleeve, we're going to want to distribute that around the shoulder seam. Often the cap of the sleeve will be a little bit bigger than the sleeve opening, so we just evenly distribute that fabric. It's a little easier because we're using a stretch fabric, but if we weren't, we might need to add gathers into the sleeve. Now we're going to sew along where we placed our pins with a zigzag stitch. And then trim away the excess fabric. And now we have all of our seams sewn. We still have to deal with the neckline, hemming the sleeves, and hemming the bottom of the shirt. Before starting with these hems, it's really important that you practice different stitches with your fabric. So you want to play with the length, the stitch that you're actually using, the width, the placement of the needle, and the tension. You can also switch up your presser foot, and for knits I highly recommend the walking foot, but you can absolutely use a normal foot as well. With some fabrics, you might find that you don't even need to hem them and you like the natural curl of the fabric. You can also play with zigzagging right on the edge of the fabric with the needle going off the side and locking in those threads. folding the fabric over for a regular looking hem might be a better option for you as well. Working with knits can be tricky, so it's important that you play with the different options on your machine, and it's just an opportunity to get a little more creative. These should all be done on a test piece of fabric. For my shirt, I decided to do a classic fold over twice hem for the sleeves and the bottom of the shirt. I'm going to fold the piece over, iron it down, and then put pins to keep it in place. If you're making a long shirt, you may find that it'll fit better if the back is slightly longer than the front. Then we're going to do the same for hemming the bodice, folding the fabric over twice and pinning it down. And then the same for the other sleeve. And then with the two sleeves and the bodice done, we're ready to move to our machine. I'm going to sew this with a straight stitch because I don't need any stretch for these pieces and I do prefer the look. And that's most of your hemming done. The last step is the neckline. This is the time to make adjustments. I decided to lower the neckline slightly in the front as well as in the back. And I just trimmed away the excess, keeping in mind how I want to hem and if I need to leave extra fabric for that. For me, I like the look of the rolled hem, so I'm just going to leave it as a raw edge. You could also adjust the shoulder seams to create less or more of a boat style neckline. And you're all done! Thank you so much for watching, and if you liked this video, please subscribe.